Hey neighbor, welcome back to Beyond ARTV. I feel like there's a stigma around gateway bands, like the ones that get you into other artists and having an enjoyment of a gateway band beyond it just being a gateway. And it's like, oh yeah, I used to like them like 10 years ago when I was a literal child, and now I just don't associate with them at all. Wow, that was so cringe. It's almost like you're expected to turn your back on your roots. And some people, they do that, it's fine. You got into rock music because of Nickelback or Metallica, and now for some reason you're like, they're too overexposed, or I hate them now. And if that's truly how you feel, that's one thing. But I feel like there's this weird sense of pressure that a lot of people, and a lot of people that I've seen in my own comments section can feel, even talking with other music fans. Just the idea that this is the gateway, this is my journey with metal, with pop punk, with pop rock, whatever it might be, and now years later it's like, alright, you kind of have to move on, but what if you don't really want to? So for me, in my early days with music, there were so many bands just exploding in the mid-2000s right as I was getting into everything. So I was fortunate enough to kind of have this basis where I was getting into like garage rock and pop punk and emo, post-hardcore, and even some hip-hop and more electronic-leaning stuff all at the same time because of what I was watching on TV with stations like Fuse or even VH1, and also the video games I was playing, the soundtracks I was coming across. They were introducing me to a lot of bands and a lot of singles, at least, all at once, and it kind of opened the door for me. But I think now it's a little bit different, especially with younger music fans. You get into a fandom or two and you're like, okay, this is pretty much all I listen to. And while that's obviously, I think, unhealthy in and of itself, it doesn't have to be a bad thing if you ended up using, say, 21 Pilots or Paramore or Iron Maiden, Slipknot, these bands that could get you into potentially other genres and even more bands that maybe do things even better. There's no reason that you should eventually have to turn your back on them entirely and not get something from them just because they were a gateway. This might feel like a non-issue to a lot of people, and I'm not saying that it's some egregious hole in the earth that everyone's falling into, and I'm just trying to save you and pull you out and say, no, it's okay, you can still listen to Tool and My Chemical Romance. I think the main reason why I wanted to put this out there is because I genuinely do see people getting picked on for like, oh, I mainly only listen to like a couple of different bands, or else, like I do check out these other things, and I have gotten into other bands, like wow, I've fallen in love with Radiohead, and I've really just appreciated the experimentation of Bjork and all of these other artists like St. Vincent, to Cage the Elephant, to all of these other avenues that have been open because it started with just a couple of bands. Like it started with Gojira, it started with Slipknot, it started with Green Day, and now I'm into more, but I also still love these others. I've seen people get picked on so often because they'll include one of those gateway bands still in maybe like their best songs or best albums of the year list, because it's like, oh, I still really enjoy this, even though I've gotten into more progressive things or deeper things or whatever. It's like, why can't we keep a foot in both worlds if we want to? Your journey with music is your own. It's not for other people to dictate what you should and should not be listening to, how you're wasting your time on this band when you should be listening to 80 other recommendations that I'm going to throw at you like a speed of bullets. Resting in your music taste comfort zone is not it, at least not forever, but also trying so hard to explore to appease other people is also not going to get you anywhere. In fact, it could have you feeling tired and burned out, and sometimes after a hard week, after a hard year, you need to rely on the music that made you who you are, that got you through difficult times, or stuff that uplifted you during the happiest moments of your life. And while I don't think a ton of people in my community that watch my content or maybe even stumble across this video are going to have a problem with this take, let it just serve as a reminder that those gateway bands, as much as you might not like them now, or as much as maybe you still love them, they're a part of your story, they're a part of your journey. So to be ashamed of that is just like saying, well, you know, when I was 13, I did stupid stuff. It's like, no shit, we all did stupid stuff, or maybe we listened to things that maybe wouldn't hold up by today's standards, or you wouldn't think is great as a young adult, or however old you are, it doesn't really matter. To obsess and fixate so heavily on music taste and what is the best and what is the worst, or what should I be doing or listening to, and are people okay with me listening to these gateway bands, it's all irrelevant, because at the end of the day, most of these are just strangers, voices, screens staring at you from the abyss. So to let that affect and impact the way that you consume music is just not something that should be on your radar at all. Some of my personal gateway bands are still among my favorite bands of all time. Like the White Stripes got me into garage rock, and they're still a favorite. Green Day got me into punk and pop punk and alternative music, and My Kim got me into emo, if you can even affix that label. It made me search a little bit deeper, and these are all still favorites of mine to this day. It's not to say that I haven't discovered since then, because obviously I have. Like on my Spotify Wrapped last year, I think I got like 1,100 artists or something that I listened to in the entire year. It's not like I just want to stick to 10, 20 different people. I like to circulate, get the air and the music flowing, but at the same time, I come back to those favorites because they're a huge part of my story. They're a huge part of why I started my channels in the first place, and I hope that in some way you can look back on your gateway bands, even if they were something as cringy as, like, I don't know, I Set My Friends on Fire, or Black Veil Brides, or whatever cringe might be determined to be. It's not cringe if it means something to you, and even if it's something that I or somebody else thinks is silly, don't let it affect your ability to go back and listen to it, or at least say, hey, it got me to where I am now. Let me know in the comments, what was your gateway artist that got you into more genres or more bands? I'm curious to see what you guys will say. Also, hit that like button while you're down there, subscribe for the love of music. You can see a couple of my recent talking videos on screen now, socials in the description, and I'll be back soon with more on Beyond ARTV.